Okay, so I want to talk about white space creativity, and before I get into it, how many of you all are like visual artists who deal with visual arts? How many of you are entrepreneurial types? Oh, what? Give it up, Miami, for the entrepreneurial shit. How many people are in like media, more like media? Okay, who did I forget? Who did I leave out? Performing arts. How many people do performing arts? They're like us. Okay, and then everybody else, everybody is fantastic. But one of the things that I thought would be interesting is to kind of talk about, and especially with making, kind of where making can come from. So in terms of tweeting, you guys got the Miami _CMI one. I'm Denise Jacobs, and if you want to hashtag that's a lot of hashtags, I know, you choose your poison, but you can use white space create as the hashtag. So I want to kind of like lay the foundation and kind of like talk about kind of creativity in general, kind of just to lay the foundation. So the way I think about it is this. When we're in the creative flow, and everybody has probably experienced this, right? When you're in the creative flow, it's amazing. You feel like, I actually like to think that we're like alchemists, right? Like there is this creative idea that exists in the ether out here, and we take it and it's like it passes through us, and we're like a semi-permeable membrane in a way, and that the creative idea passes through us and comes out into the world and becomes this tangible form. Right? He's like, yeah, totally like that. And so it's like bringing our babies, actually, into the world in a lot of ways. And it feels a lot like magic, but it isn't. As a matter of fact, there's a great TED Talk. I don't know if you guys have seen the TED Talk. Charles Lim has a TED Talk called Your Brain on Improvisation. Amazing. Absolutely go run when you go home. Go and watch that one, because he actually puts people in an EEG machine and monitors their brain activity and what's happening to their brains while they're doing improv, while they're doing improvisational music. He has rappers go in there and he gives them like an opening line, and then they just go on and they do it, and he watches what's happening in your brain and the neuroscience of creativity and improvisations. Amazing. But one of the things that he says about creativity is that it's magical, but it's not magic. And I like to think that that means that it's something that we all can access, right? It's not this thing that is like artists sometimes are hailed as these like, you know, amazing people who are like out here on a pedestal, and then there's just the normal people who are trying to slog by, and everybody actually has this wonderful creative power. Unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is that when we really want to be creative, we are instead stuck, right? We're blocked. We have this amazing tool, however. I just got done participating in Sign Miami that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it was a fantastic conference. But the thing that I found really interesting was how enamored they were with technology and like bleeding edge information and artificial intelligence and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, artificial intelligence is great, but real live intelligence is great too. And you know, they say that we only use 5% of our brains or 10% of our brains or whatever, and I think our brains are actually one of the biggest untapped resources on the planet. If we could actually harness our brains and feel like we understand how to control our brains for creative output, we would be able to do even more amazing things than we already do. Part of what we need to do, though, is we need to manage time, we need to manage attention, and we need to manage focus. And this is a lot of the stuff that we're actually quite bad at doing, and a lot of the things that, as I'll talk about later, the world and kind of the culture around us discourages us from doing. And because of that, we can't always access all the great ideas that are kind of locked within our heads and often trapped within our subconscious. And so I'm going to kind of get into talking about that a little bit. But first, I want to talk about this idea of power and creativity. Because, like I was saying before, we're all powerful, right? We all have, especially, I mean, he's standing out in the field in the winter. I mean, this cat is like, he's serious, right? He's like, psst. Cold doesn't even bother me. If that were me, I would be like shivered in a ball, but that's a different story. But we're all powerful. We all have this creative power within us. And I speak a lot to software developers, and it's very interesting. I go to these conferences and I ask them, how many of you feel like you're creative? And like, you know, a smattering of hands go up. And I'm like, are you kidding? Somebody said to you, look, I want this, that, and the other thing to happen on a computer. And you go, okay. And you go, and then somebody go, and they actually can do that? And that's not creative? What? So I feel like it's interesting. A lot of times, instead of using our power fully, we instead either try to contain it or we end up giving it away, right? And we end up giving it away to kind of the enemy of white space, which is noise and clutter. So we should be, and a lot of times, more internally focused to kind of to be able to access how we're going to control our brains. But instead, we're looking outside of ourselves all the times, and we're always dealing with and kind of fighting with and warring with distractions. Now, I know a lot of you may relate to this picture. We're totally addicted to technology. She's like, mm-hmm. I feel like in a lot of ways, we have gotten to the point, do you guys remember the days when you used to drive somewhere and you didn't stop to pick up your phone every 2 seconds to see what was going on? Do you remember those days? I remember those days. Remember way, way back, some of you weren't born when this happened, but there was a time, okay, I'm like totally dating myself. There was a time when people would call you, and if you weren't home, they just missed you. That's right. And then they'd call you back later, and they'd be like, oh, I called you at 7, you weren't there. You're like, oh, I was at the movie. And they'd be like, oh, okay. Nothing. Now, if people don't get a hold of you within like 2 seconds, they're like, where were you? I mean, you're like, I put the phone down, and the phone was off. I tried to call you, I texted, and then I sent you a DM on Twitter, and then I sent you a Facebook. Where were you? Like, I was living my life. I don't know. It's a crazy idea, but it's true. So we're really addicted to this hyperconnectivity, to being connected all the time. I feel like a lot of it is because we want to be connected with people, but we actually don't. We're starting to lose the ability to actually be connected with people in a meaningful way. There's something called intermittent reinforcement. Have you guys heard of this? So, well-known study, they take a bunch of rats, they put them in a cage with a lever, they press the lever, they get food. They press the lever again, they get food. They press the lever again, they get food. And then the scientist is like, let's switch it up a little bit. They press the lever, they don't get food. But the cats, sorry, I got cats at home, so. But the rats, cats, it's easy to get them confused. But the rats are so used to getting the food that they just keep pressing the lever. Now, I actually did a talk in Las Vegas like last month, and it was really interesting to be upstairs from a casino floor. But if you've ever been to a casino, you've seen people there just pressing the lever, hoping that the money amount will go up. And then, I don't know about you, but I have had many days where I sat there just refreshing the button on email. I know there's going to be email anytime now. What actually happens is our brains squirt out a little dose of dopamine, a chemical in our brain that makes us addicted to the behavior. So every time you press the lever and you get the little piece of food, or you press the lever and you get some more money, or you hit the button and you get an email, or a little bit of a doop for Twitter, or a ding ding for your text message, your brain sends out dopamine and it reinforces the behavior. that could be kind of a problem. Jonathan Fields wrote a book called Uncertainty, and one of the things that he says about hyperconnectivity is that it gives the perception of getting more done. It gives the perception of feeling like we're connected, and we're using every waking moment of every hour. But the problem is that what ends up happening is we end up feeling completely overwhelmed, right? Overwhelmed with information, overwhelmed with things, and then I think in some ways we do that because we're kind of afraid of really tapping into this creative power. We create all these distractions so that we have an excuse to say, oh, well, I couldn't do that because I had this and that and the other thing. And we're all over the place all at once. And so I have an idea of how we can potentially do things differently. How can we get to the point where we're actually using our creativity and we're actually using that to make things? Like I said, creativity in a way, I like to think of it at least, is kind of a form of channeling this kind of divine power that we're all kind of born with. Sir Ken Robinson, who wrote Out of Our Minds and has another amazing TED Talk that you should write about, how creativity, education kills creativity, says that creativity is newness produced. And so I think that there's a way that we can move from kind of thinking about stuff, move from the that's me. Move from the distractions and everything and get to the point where we're creating. But my thought is that instead of being all over the place and being multitasking and doing all this stuff, maybe the idea is to not do. Maybe it's not in doing, maybe it's in not doing, maybe it's in something else. And so I want to offer you that creativity doesn't come from the thing that you're doing. It doesn't come from being active. A lot of times it actually comes from that in-between space, that space between the activity, the space between thoughts, the space between actual action is where creativity springs from, and that's actually how you can get to where you can make more. So, Jonathan Fields also said that genius is the offspring of the in-between. So let's take a look at how we can use the white space of our time, the white space of our attention, and the white space of our focus so that we can take that and use that and hone that to direct our creativity in ways where we can make. So let's talk about how we can gain a little bit of clarity. So one of the things, like I said before, I'm big into the human brain, and I'm big into neuroscience. And so I want to talk about some ways that we can maximize this awesome tool that we have. Now, one of the things that happens when we think about creativity, a lot of times when creativity is presented, we're presented with this idea of, oh, you're either left brain or you're right brain, right? And left brain is logical and analytical and computational sciences and blah, 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 blah. And the right brain is like color and form and ideas and all of this stuff, which is partially true. But creativity actually really comes from having a balanced brain. It doesn't come from totally eschewing the left side of your brain and only delving into the right side of your brain. It actually comes from both hemispheres of your brain working well together and communicating with each other very well. It comes from neurons firing well. And so one of the first ways that I want to talk about this happening is to talk about brain waves. How many of you guys are like, dang, she's getting all scientifical on me and stuff. How many of you guys are familiar with brain waves? Yeah? Okay, so for the ones that she's like, so cool little chart that I made here, so, which I can't actually like read the stuff, so I might actually come over here and read some of it. So I'm going to skip the top one because I usually save that one for last. So beta brain waves, so basically right now, for example, I always like to say right now, unless of course you're falling asleep, in which case I can't help you. But right now you're probably in beta brainwave mode. That's when you're alert, when you're listening, when you're paying attention, you're focused on something, you're doing something. Concentration, computing, arranging, organizing, making sense of the outer world, that is usually beta brainwave mode. Alpha brainwave mode, as you can see, and I love this chart because I love seeing the waves. You can see how it slows down, it becomes a more relaxed wave. Alpha waves is when you're alert and lucid. So you all know that sensation that you get when you're laying in bed and you start to feel really relaxed and warm, and your body's kind of heavy, and your thoughts kind of start going off in kind of bizarre places, and you're just whoa, wait, what just happened? So that a lot of time is alpha brainwave mode. You can actually also get into alpha brainwave mode when you're meditating, when you go into that lovely little place. It's usually when you're internally focused. A lot of times, as soon as you close your eyes, your brain will start going to alpha brainwave mode. When you lay down, your brain will start to go in alpha brainwave mode. It's fantastic. Incidentally, actually, children, up until about the age of about 5, spend most of their time in alpha brainwave mode, which also explains why children come up with wackadoodle things, right? So theta waves, little slower, little lower. So theta waves are also related to high states of creativity. Alpha brain waves are actually related with creativity, subconscious creativity, really deep relaxation, deep meditation. People who are experienced meditators can go into theta brainwave mode like nobody's business. Usually for people who aren't as familiar with that, it takes a little long. A lot of times you go into that when you're sleeping. No problem. And then delta brainwave modes, usually if you're in a deep, deep sleep and you're knocked out, and sometimes you ever have that sleep where you wake up and you're just whoa, I felt like I was just out, nothing was happening, it was just dark. That would probably be delta. I imagine that if people are in a coma, a lot of times they're probably in delta brainwave modes. If you do get into it intentionally, a lot of times people who are transcendental meditators get into it. Also, a lot of times the super consciousness, when people are oh, I felt like I was part of everything. A lot of times that would be in delta brainwave mode. And then finally, at the end, way up at the top is gamma brainwave modes. And gamma is usually not something that's sustained. It's usually a really high state, super high alertness, aha moments, sometimes crisis states, when people say they were in an accident and they could see everything. I remembered everything that was happening, even though it only happened in 2 seconds. A lot of times that would be gamma waves. Now, alpha brainwave mode is actually our buddy, because we can get into that super easily. We go into it all the time, even if we don't know it. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have you guys do a little exercise. So are you ready? Okay, so close your eyes. And I want you to close your eyes and just breathe through your nose and just get yourself nice and relaxed. So if your shoulders are up around your ears, just let them drop. You don't have to force them, you just let them go. And keep breathing. And if you can, if you want to take your tongue and just let it rest lightly against the roof of your mouth. You don't have to press it or force it. You can just let it rest up there. And just keep breathing. And just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Okay, now at the risk of not having you guys fall asleep on me, I'm going to have you come back. So come up, you're no, come on back, come on back. I love them with I love the resistance. That's my favorite part, where people I can always see people no, it was beautiful in there. So if you felt yourself start to settle down, maybe your thoughts kind of started to settle down. A lot of times you feel your body kind of sink down a little lower, so you're not but you're kind of down like this. That is your brain moving from beta brainwave mode into alpha brainwave mode. And if you had stuck with it even more, you would have gone into it even deeper. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times when I going to sleep, I'll hear music that I've never heard before. I'll all kinds of things will start happening sometimes, and that is the beauty of alpha brainwave mode. So The other thing that's really great is what happens when your brain goes into this place. What also happens is, like I said, the hemispheres actually start to sync with each other, and they start to send messages back and forth between each other so much more easily. And when you're being creative, what happens is all of the information that's kind of stacked and stored in the left part of your brain, all of the data basically, when you're in alpha brainwave mode and in more relaxed places, the right side of your brain can take all that information and take it out and kind of take it off, and kind of, I imagine it taking everything off of the shelf and this going, okay, what can we do with this? And like start cooking, you know? Start putting things together. Oh, I can do that. I can make a pterodactyl. I can make a hat. I can, fine. So that's kind of how, a lot of times, how the creative process works. Now, a lot of ways, easy ways to get into alpha brainwave mode, because it's such a great place. It's such a wonderful place to access creativity, and we have the power to get into that. Like I said, laying down, easy. If you ever feel like you have these moments where you're feeling blocked, stuff isn't flowing, this is an in-between time. This is white space time, right? Most of the time we're doing, but how many times have you like to get an idea instead of sitting there thinking or being like Winnie the Pooh, think, instead, you just like, you know what, I'm just going to lay down. Just lay down. It will automatically put your brain into a more relaxed space and help you think of ideas. Second thing, you probably don't think of this, like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing stuff all the time. No, you know, you can actually deliberately give yourself permission, 5 minutes, looking out the window. Watching waves, watching clouds. Spacing out is great for your brain. It is great white space for your brain to take that information and to have your hemispheres start working with each other and for you to start to come up with ideas. Daydreaming is fantastic. Again, not one of these things where you're like, I thought I was supposed to be doing something. To make stuff, sometimes you have to do nothing, right? So to daydream is great. It actually, again, just like spacing out, you kind of, and just like when we closed our eyes, you kind of take away the outside world, right? And then you are able to go in and be more internally focused, and you can allow that process to start. People who daydream are actually known to find better, like, hidden connections between information. And so you can be part of that group. Mindless activity. So I always like to say, you know, maybe you are doing something, but you're not doing exactly the thing, that you're not like working on the thing. Maybe you're washing the dishes. I've actually had like the beginning ideas of something and then like washed my dishes, got the dishes, you know, I actually started finding dishes to wash, put on my, it could happen. I put on the voice memo on my phone and like talked through the process, like talked through all my ideas while I was washing the dishes. And it was kind of the mindful, repetitive nature of something physical, and you know, and it helped. It really helped. I actually came up with a whole presentation that way. Taking showers. How many of you guys have had good ideas in the showers? Right? So, totally is a way to get into alpha brainwave mode very easily. I actually talked to somebody at another conference who said that he actually will take sometimes 5-6 showers a day when he's like, you know, he was like, you know, sometimes he was like, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but he's like, it totally helps, and it helps me with my thinking process. And so, or not thinking, right? Sometimes I tell to people, they're like, well, what if you have an idea in the shower? You know, they have crayons, you know, like in the shower, crayons that wash off, like soap crayons, you can do that. Sometimes I've been in the shower and I just like dried off really fast and like sat down and like wrote things out. However you need to set it up, you can do that. Another thing is to leverage movement, but not just any movement, but actually specifically cross-channel movement. So when you do motions like this, it's called cross-channel movement, and it's because you are using opposite sides of your body at the same time, right? So when you're walking, it actually helps. It helps your brain actually start to sync with each other, and they've done studies, and that's what happens. So running is good. Walking is actually even better. And just a lot of times people will say, I went on a walk. Some people who are creative as their business, as their jobs, like actually many of you are, will work in taking a walk, a long walk that they use to think through things during the day. And that's, again, somebody's like, well, you're not doing anything, you're just taking a walk. Well, I'm taking a walk, but it's like sometimes it's the most important part of the day for some people, for them to come up and generate with ideas. And then one of the last things, three more things, this is one of the last few things. Refocusing through your, using your breath, just like we did. So sit down and just kind of control your breathing, or just observe your breathing, not even control it, just to observe it. And then doing that also gets you present and gets you into the moment. Laughing is fantastic. So again, you're like, but that's not doing anything, but that's okay, because laughing actually stimulates part of your brain. It stimulates your right brain, and it helps like release inhibitions and things like that. So anything that was kind of going on in your frontal cortex that's like, you know, kind of like the gatekeeper for everything, and oh, it should be like this and all that stuff, helps that relax so that you get more information. And being fun and playful also helps too. So a lot of times, maybe you have kids, for example, and you're like totally feeling stuck. Go and play with your kids for a little bit. Forget about the thing that you're trying to think of, and then come back to it afterwards. You may find that you have exactly the idea that you need. So there's a guy in India whose name is Madan Kataria, and he calls himself the laughter guru. And he actually, people come and fly from all over the world to come, and they stand in a circle and they laugh, and sometimes they just start off going, ha, 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 hee, 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 and then they start laughing for real. And he teaches people how to laugh, but one of the things that he says is that when you're playful and you're laughing and everything, the right side of your brain is activated, and that is the place where real power is. It's unlimited, and you can do and be anything you want. So instead of kind of going through these hurdles of trying to, like, you know, come up with these ideas and be creative, I got to do something to be creative, maybe really what we should do is like intend alpha and intend this kind of more relaxed state so that we can get into the place that we want. And so the last part of this is to say that when your brain is supposedly doing nothing, it's really doing a tremendous amount. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, which is my favorite thing actually, is leveraging the invisible. So white space is about, basically, in visual arts and everything, it's the space around the thing that you really want to focus on. So I like to think about it as it's the invisible thing that gives form to the thing that you're paying attention to, that you're looking at. And so we can get a little bit of aid from the thing that you can't see, or the things that you can't see. So this is the place where I need you to dabble in a little bit of mysticism with me, because it can be a fun way to understand and solve a problem. So I want to tell you a story, like I was talking about children and 4-year-olds and how awesome they are. Back about 20 years ago, was it 20 years ago? No, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was like 18 years ago. I was living in this house, and it was a house that had been converted into apartments. And down in the basement apartment, there was a woman who lived, and she was a single mother, and she had a daughter named Natalie. And Natalie took a shine to me. She was really sweet, and so she would come and knock on the door, and she would say, do you want to play? I'm like 24 years old. I'm like, okay. She was adorable. She's like, you couldn't resist her because she was so cute. So I would have her come up into the apartment. I would get a bunch of papers and pens and everything, and we would draw. And one day she drew me a picture. This is not the picture she drew me because I can't find it. I can't believe I can't find it, but I can't find it because I keep everything. She drew me a picture, and she gave it to me, and she was so proud. And I was like, Natalie, what is it? Because I didn't know. And she was like, it's a chicken cave. Okay, so it's like a cave that has chickens in it? She's like, no, it's a chicken cave. And I was like, so it's like a cave shaped like a chicken? She's like, no, it's a chicken cave. Okay, I still don't know what she was getting at with this chicken cave thing, but it made perfect sense to her. And I love the fact that it made perfect sense to her. So I think 4-year-olds have got this amazing minds, and a lot of the things, some of the things that 4-year-olds also have, besides this amazing mind, is they often have imaginary friends, right? And some of you may have had imaginary friends when you were younger. I kind of wish I had. I didn't actually seem to have enough imagination to have an imaginary friend. But I kind of wish I did now. I think I have more imaginary friends now than I did then. But so we can kind of use some imaginary friends to help us with our creative process. The first kind of imaginary friend that we can use is kind of the internal lands of our own subconscious. Now, I was saying taking walks is good. I took a writing class, again, 1,000 years ago, and one of the instructor was telling us about this writer who, whenever she wanted to come up with ideas, she would take these long walks in the morning through the streets of London where she lived, and she would listen to the songs that were playing in her head. And she basically said that, look, these songs are a message from my subconscious. So she would listen to the lyrics, and she would take the lyrics as something that her subconscious was trying to communicate to her. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So you probably have songs running through your head at any given point in time, but most of the time you're probably just like, oh yeah, was just thinking of that, that song. But what if that song was actually your subconscious being like, dude, pay attention to this thing, or this is an idea, or this is something you should pursue, or remember that thing you said you were going to do? This is me telling you that, this is me giving you some kind of clue about this thing that you were supposed to do, right? So that might be an interesting thing to do. First little imaginary friend. The second one is to leverage our genius. Now, a lot of people think, okay, I can't be a genius. I can't be like Albert Einstein, right? Albert Einstein actually used to daydream, by the way. He used to play music to try to get ideas. I think he used to take naps and wake himself up before he fell fully asleep to get ideas. So he knew all the tricks. But I'm not talking about trying to be a genius. I'm talking about having a genius. So the ancient Greeks used to believe, have you guys heard Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk? Yes, no, good, because then I'm going to tell you what she says in there. So the ancient Greeks used to believe in genius. And a genius was something that an artist would have, like the spirit that lived in the walls of an artist's house. And that when an artist was doing work, the genius would come out and kind of whisper, okay, do this, okay, do that stroke, do this movement as part of the thing. And the genius would inform the artist's work. So I think that's great, because then we're not trying to be brilliant ourselves. We're allowing this kind of entity, this formless entity, to kind of inform our brilliance, and then it's like, I think the pressure's off, right? Whatever ideas come to you, it's because the genius gave it to you, not because you came up with it yourself. The other kind of fantastic entity that we could use is a daemon. Now, how many of you guys are familiar with The Hitchhiker's Guide to, thank you. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the end of the universe. No, wait. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So in that, there's a babblefish, right? The way that people understand the universal translator basically is a babblefish that goes in your ear, and then it translates the different languages. The way I like to think of a daemon is kind of like the interpreter of the gods. So the daemon kind of is somebody kind of like the genius, but it's not like limited to the walls of your house. It's kind of with you all the time. That kind of whispers in your ear little pieces of inspiration and information and tips and things like that about what the gods want you to do as your art, as your creativity, as your idea, right? So I like that idea. Again, the pressure's off. Then last but not least, we have the muses. Now, when the muses got kind of finally got to the end of their thing, there was 9 of them. 9 is way too many people to try to deal with. And so I say that we should try to work with the 3 original muses. And the 3 original muses were Memne, memory, Melete, which is practice or occasion, and Aote, which was voice. And so when I think about this and the muses, I love the idea of the muses because they were like the true speakers for whom the artist was merely a mouthpiece. Kind of like the daemon being the speaker for the gods, the muses were there to kind of, again, like the genius, inform and guide and push the artist along. And they also inspired people to be their best, and I love that part. So in terms of memory, I like to think you can always go back and think of all the times where you created something that surprised you or delighted you or fulfilled you or anything like that, to know that this time where you're trying to create now, you can bring all of the energy and all of the success and all of the positive feelings from that past, those memories, and you can use that here. Not only that, but that your ideas are often informed by everything that you've experienced, everything that you've seen, all of your memories. Practice or occasion, the way I like to think about that is showing up to your creativity every day. So instead of like saying that, okay, my creativity is this thing that, sometimes just kind of happens out of the blue, that you make some time, that you spend 10 minutes writing down something, or you spend 10 minutes doing a walk where you just kind of kick around ideas and then another 10 minutes or 5 minutes writing things down, or that whenever something comes to you, that you actually give it the respect and the time that it deserves by notating it somewhere and giving it a promise that you'll come back to it at some point in time. And then finally, voice. The way I like to think about voice is really expressing your own voice, your own kind of personal imprint or DNA on whatever it is you're doing. That the fact that you know that because it's coming from you, that nobody is ever going to do it the same way you are, right? And that the fact that it's come to you means that it's special, and that it deserves to come out into the world, and that you deserve to have your particular stamp, your voice, your resonance with it. And then finally, the last little entity that I think we can invite in is the spirit of the idea. And this one I actually like maybe the best, because the spirit of the idea, again, takes the pressure, I feel like, off of me. Instead of me coming up with this idea, instead of me trying to be a genius or trying to be awesome, I always feel like the spirit of the idea comes to me and I'm in service to it. So ideas, you can think, are like I said before, these kind of amorphous entities that are actually really wanting to become tangible and to take shape in the world. Elizabeth Gilbert says that the world is being circled by ideas and creativity that wants to be made manifest, and they're looking for portals to come through. And so the way I think about it is that ideas use us and not vice versa. That, in fact, we're kind of avatars for ideas in a way, and that they come to us and they're like, great, you! And they're like, shoo! And they go inside and then they kind of animate our bodies and animate our minds until they become the actual tangible thing that it was supposed to be. And then they're like, thank you. And then they're off because they're off into the world being their tangible selves. So in that respect, then I think the important thing is to listen to the idea. When an idea comes to you, when it chooses you to be the vessel, to be its channel into the world, that you really listen to it, and that you even converse with it. When you take your thinking walks and you take your creativity, development walks, that what I actually do is I will actually say, okay, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to make you, how do you want me to put you into the world? What is it that you want me to do? And then whatever ideas I get with that, I'll take that as the idea telling me what it wants to do. Not me trying to come up with the idea myself, but the idea is dictating to me how it wants to happen. It's great. And so with that, that also means that you trust the idea. You trust that the idea knows how it wants to be, that you kind of relinquish this kind of this control for it, and you just let the idea be what you want it to be. And when you do that, voila, you will actually come up with something really, really wonderful, and probably something that surprises you and that pushes you and that does something that you thought you might not have been able to do. So, to close this all up, I ask, you need to choose and think about how potentially you'll move forward in leveraging this white space. The choice is yours. To come up with ideas, you have options, right? The question is, how will you use this creative brain power that everybody has and that we all have? I feel like creative flow, like I was saying, isn't about, certainly it is about doing, but before it's about doing, it's about leveraging that space in between, leveraging that relaxed period, relaxing your brain and really getting into a place where you're allowing ideas to come to you. And I think that through this, that we can actually reclaim that power instead of giving it away to other people, giving it away to distractions and everything, that we can really come back and really reclaim our power, because our brains and even ourselves, our souls, everything, we're so much more powerful, I think, than we allow ourselves to think. And I think it's really time now for us to start really tapping into that and expressing it. So, all of you here actually do think of yourselves as creative in some way, shape, or form, but I just want to accentuate to it that you are creative, you do matter, and that you do have something amazing to put into the world. And I would love to see people get into this great place of channeling their creativity so they get to like a truer, wiser, more powerful, challenging, and potentially even disruptive form of creativity that can not just make things and make things better, but to create what I like to call betterness. So, I will leave you with this quote. This is actually something that inspires me and something that I feel is true and may be true for you as well. That creativity makes day-to-day experiences more vivid, more enjoyable, more rewarding, and that when we live creatively, boredom is completely banished and every moment holds the promise of a fresh discovery. Well, so I encourage you to take what you've learned today about the way the brain works, about harnessing the innate creative power that we all have, and leverage white space so that you can be more creative and do awesome things. Thank you.